You are watching the Poor Boys Horology podcast, the podcast for watch enthusiasts on a budget. Your host for today's podcast is Dr. Ed DeVries, an amateur horologist whose personal collection includes Timex, Rolex, and everything in between. If you are interested in dive watches, dress watches, designer watches, military watches, automatic watches, hand-winding watches, quartz watches, or pocket watches, the Poor Boys Horology podcast is about to become your favorite podcast. So click like and subscribe. Then sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode of the Poor Boys Horology podcast.
Hello and welcome to Just 3 Watches. Okay, I've got to apologize to Jody. I got to give up the temptation to continuously open my show stealing your shtick. But it's just so fun to do. Although I got to say, I don't do it, and I'll probably never do it with the enthusiasm or the pizzazz with which Jody does it. But today we're not going to look at just one watch. We're going to look at 3 watches. And let me flip the camera here. And I'll show you the 3 watches that we are going to be looking at. Let's do just a quick wristwatch check. I am wearing a 1968 Timex Marlin, and I have had a few viewers point out to me that this is not a 1968 Timex Marlin. This watch was probably manufactured in probably 1966, but my grandfather acquired it in 1968, and he had it since 1968, and of course when he died, I inherited it. And what's amazing is that this watch keeps a-licking and keeps on ticking, just as Timex promises. But the beauty of this watch is that I wind it and it still works. Never been serviced, never been to a jeweler. In fact, it has a movement that you can't service it. When it stops working, you just throw it away. But 1968 to 78, 78 to 88, 88 to 98, 98 to 2008, 2008 to 2018, that's 50 years. 2021. This watch is 53 years old, and I wind it up and it runs. Beautiful thing. Anyways, but I'm wearing it today because we're going to be reviewing this watch later in the show, which is the Timex Marlin reissue. Anyways, let me flip the camera and show you the watches that we're going to be reviewing today. And as you can see, we have 3 here. One is a, looks like an Apple Watch, but it's not. It's an X7 smartwatch. It's an Android watch that was made to look like and mimic the Apple Watch in every way. I'm going to give it a review here a little bit later. We unboxed it in last month's episode. If you want to see that unboxing, I refer you back to last month's episode. Also unboxed in last month's episode is... we unboxed the Marlin in last month's episode, so again, I'll refer you back to that if you would like to look at that unboxing. And then the 3rd watch here was received at the beginning of the month. We received it on the 1st of the month, I believe. And so we didn't get it out in time for last month's Poor Boys Horology podcast. But Davis B had actually had 2 replica Tudor Black Bay sent to me. And so here's the second one. And we unbox it later in this video. In fact, let's do this. Let's break for a commercial from TBR Magazine, the Barnes Review. And then let's have that unboxing. Then we'll have another segment, our retro segment, another commercial, and then we'll have our 3 watch reviews of the 3 watches that you see before you.
Open your web browser and type in www.barnesreview.org and discover the Barnes Review magazine. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There is no more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review magazine in its print form, or in convenient electronic delivery. Our host has been a subscriber to both formats for years. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review.
All right, this package has arrived in the mail today, and it should have been here 2 weeks ago. It should be a Tudor Black Bay, or a fake Tudor Black Bay, ordered from DHgate. It was actually ordered before the fake Tudor Black Bay that I reviewed on last month's podcast was ordered. And therefore it should have come before the other one did, and it did not. But let's see what we got here. Unlike the last one, we didn't get a nice box. This watch does have considerably more weight to it, though, than the other one does. See if I can see in here. The lettering is a lot nicer on this watch than was the last one. The bezel is the bezel seems to be nice, a little bit of back play, but not too much. I like the snowflake hands. The printing seems to be a little more crisp. The band and the bracelet rather is signed. It says Tudor there. It appears to have the markings. Having a little bit of difficulty getting this blue plastic off. Does appear to have the markings. Let me take off the watch that I'm wearing. By the way, I'm wearing my SKME S-Shock. I had this in the fire the other day, and once again it survived. That SKME S-Shock just seems to be an indestructible watch, but let's see here. I'm going to have to remove a link from the bracelet. But the bracelet does seem to have a nice weight and feel to it. What time is it? It is 4:04. This watch does seem to have a very nice feel to it. I'm winding it right now, and it has a good sound. It has a good feel to it. Screwing down the crown. And we have a signed crown there. I'll have to get that blue plastic off a little later. But I am on original impression, first impression of this watch. Looking at it for the first time. Compared to the watch that I reviewed on last month's program. And if you want to go back and look at last month's program to see the Tudor Brass Bay or the Bronze Black Bay that I reviewed in last month's program, which was also a replica watch ordered from DHgate by one of our viewers named Davis B. You will see that my original impression of that watch was weak. My original impression of this watch is stronger. But I'll give this watch some wrist time. I will say this is not really a red. It looks red on screen. It's actually more of a purplish or a burgundy look in person. But I do like this watch overall as far as replicas go. I don't know that this is a bad one, but again, we'll see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this watch some wrist time. And I'm going to tell you in an upcoming segment that will be recorded at a later date what I thought of this watch.
Extra, extra, read all about it!
If you're like me, and I'll bet you are, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net. And find out about the American Free Press. Do it today.
Extra, extra!
On last month's Poor Boys Horology podcast, for our retro segment, we showed pictures of and the commercial for the 1986 Chevrolet Caprice Classic Brougham. That, of course, being my third car, the car that I drove my senior year of high school and into college. I love that car. In fact, as I said on last month's program, that 1986 Chevrolet Caprice Classic Brougham was nicer than my grandfather's 1986 Cadillac. Same year model, both made by General Motors. The Chevy Caprice Classic, in my opinion, I got that car that year, and well, I got my car later in 1989, but my grandfather had bought his Cadillac in 1986. Back then, my grandfather would buy a new Cadillac every year. So he bought a new Cadillac in 86, traded it in 87 for an 87 model. In 88, he traded that 87 in for the 88 and so forth. But I believe that my Caprice was nicer than my grandfather's 1986 Cadillac was. I believe my Caprice was nicer than his 87 Cadillac was, nicer than his 88 Cadillac was nicer than the 89, 90, and 91 Cadillacs that he was driving when I was driving my Caprice Classic. So why did I get rid of that car? I really did not do so by choice. The car was stolen. And being the poor college student that I was, I only had liability insurance, and so the insurance did not compensate me for the loss, and I didn't have a big check to go out and buy a new car with. So I had to buy what I could afford, and that was a 1974 Ford Pinto. And I'm going to talk about that car here in a minute, but first let me show you the commercial for the Pinto. It really is kind of a cool commercial.
From the first day we built Pinto, we measured it in our minds against the toughest competitor in the world, ourselves. We decided to invent the basic little economy car all over again. The car that would run and run and run and get lots of miles to the gallon and hardly ever see a repair shop. A car that would cost very little and would feel good on the road. The Ford Pinto was built 40 years after the Ford Model A, but we think it's got the same kind of toughness, dependability, and value, because deep down, it's the same basic idea. And when you get back to basics, you get back to Ford. Pinto, 2-door sedan or 3-door runabout at your Ford dealers.
And so what drew me to this Pinto was not just the fact that I was able to buy it for $635, although that was, I had about $800 to work with at the time, and $635 was less than $800. But this particular Pinto, it was a beautiful car. It had a nice two-tone to it. It had a pristine interior for its age. The carpet was in good condition. The vinyl and the cloth of the interior were in good condition. It had a nice trim package with some chrome and some wood grain. It really was a good-looking car, even for a 1974 Pinto, even for a Pinto in general. It was a good-looking car. But what really kind of drew me to this car was the gentleman who had owned it before me had just replaced the engine and the transmission. The 4-cylinder turbo engine and transmission that went into the mid-80s models of Ford Mustangs would mount and bolt right into the Pinto. You could slide it right in there. It just bolted right up, easy peasy. And there was a gentleman who had paid to have a low-mileage 4-cylinder turbo engine and transmission from a Mustang that had been wrecked. And he wanted to have it put into this Pinto. And he was making payments on that repair work. And he was $635 away from paying off that engine and transmission replacement. And he stopped making the payments. And the mechanic had taken a lien against the car. And he sold it to me for the $635 that he was owed. And so I got a car with a low mileage engine and transmission from a 4-cylinder turbo Mustang. And let me tell you, this Pinto had some pep, it had some kick. In fact, when I would get this thing up to speed, it would go airborne. It would literally, all 4 tires would come off the ground, which actually kind of made it was cool, but at the same time, it was a dangerous car to drive. But even the kids I went to college with thought that it was just a cool car. And so when it came time to sell it, I did not have a hard time doing that. But this car here, it was a beautiful car in its way. And, you know, it's one of those cars from my past that if I could go back and buy it back, I would. Because it really was, you know, a cool car. You know, and the older I get, the more fond of it I become. I know that sounds weird. Maybe I didn't have the capacity to appreciate it then as much as I do now. Anyways, there were some nice things about this car. Like I said, I talked about the two-tone paint. You know, talked about the trim package and everything. I want to point out the upholstery in this car. Look at this two-tone, two-tiered upholstery. You've got vinyl and cloth. You know, that's not the kind of upholstery you would expect in a Ford Pinto. That's the kind of upholstery you would expect in a much more expensive car, maybe in a muscle car, sports car maybe, but not the kind of upholstery you would expect from an economy hatchback such as the Ford Pinto. Anyways, this car got great gas mileage. I know they talked about exploding gas tanks. Mine never exploded on me. I don't know. Wasn't really something I was worried about as a kid. But I'm going to show you one more Ford Pinto commercial, and then we're going to have some watch reviews.
When America needed a better idea, Ford put it on wheels.
October 1st, Ford Pinto kicks up its heels with sporty new styling front and back, a sporty suspension for nimble handling, and new exciting options like rally instruments and a flip-up removable roof. Test one October 1st.
When America needs a better idea, Ford puts it on wheels.
All right, I'm on the phone again with Dr. William Von Peters, who has been my personal doctor for the last 10 years. We have a dear lady in our church, Dr. Von, who suffers from Lyme's disease. Is there anything that you could do to help her?
LymeQuest, and I've had people tell me that the LymeQuest is the only formula that they've ever found that actually seemed to help them.
What is the secret of LymeQuest that makes it effective when other treatments people are saying aren't working so well for them?
Basically, what it does, it will cross the blood-brain barrier to be able to get the body so that it can recognize Lyme. Because Lyme's is a spirochete that will basically go into kind of a dormant stage as a cocoon and then come out periodically to replicate and then go back dormant again. And so as it's doing this, it gradually destroys the immune system. So what we've done is basically use the homeopathics that deal with the spirochete so that the body will recognize it and it get past its camouflage so that it can act against it. And so that the most people will notice an improvement in their symptomology and everything as their immune system becomes stronger and not depleted by the Lyme spirochete. Because homeopathy, the philosophy is like cures like. And whereas allopathy, which is what the MDs use, is opposite cures. So, if you have something that, for example, if something's too hot, you give something that would cause a heat in the body, and it will tend to dissipate the heat then. Such as coffee on a hot day as an example of that in real life. We don't make, in none of our products do we make medical claims for. It's just to assist the body in healing and being able to heal itself, but we make no medical claims for it.
And so if somebody wants to get LymeQuest, try it for themselves, what do they need to do?
Basically, just go to the website for a company, LifeQuest Formulas, and so that would be www.life, Quest, Quest, Formulas, that's plural, LifeQuestFormulas.com.
All right, LifeQuestFormulas.com, and for our radio listeners who happen to be watching on YouTube, that'll be on the screen as well. you'll want to go to LifeQuest Formulas, and you'll want to check this out, and you'll want to check out some of the other homeopathic products that Dr. Von Peters is offering there as well. And so we have 3 watches here. We have the X7, we have the Timex Marlin reissue, and we have the Tudor Black Bay replica watch. And so which watch should we start with? Let's go ahead and start with this watch here. Let's go ahead and start with the X7. This X7 is a smartwatch. It has an Apple type strap. You can take an Apple strap and you can put it right in there, and it'll replace this X7 strap with an Apple strap. They're identical straps. This X7 was made to be a clone of the Apple Watch. Some things I want to tell you about this watch. This watch was sent to us by its manufacturer. It was shipped to us from China. And if you get this watch from China, you can get this watch from anywhere from $9 to $14. If you buy it on eBay, you can buy it from anywhere from $13 to about $19. If you buy it on Amazon, you can buy it from anywhere from about $14 to $22. Of course, if you buy it on Amazon, you can get 2-day prime shipping. This watch is designed to look like the Apple Watch in every way. You see, you've got the speakers there. You've got both of your push buttons there, as well as that little hole there is your microphone. It mimics all the features of the Apple Watch, all of your health stuff. Just flipping through here, that is a screensaver or a wallpaper or an image that I uploaded to the watch. That one didn't come on the watch, so you can customize the watch face. There's Bart Simpson there. I got Minnie Mouse. But the ability to customize this watch is limited. Also, this watch only runs with one app. It's called the Fit Pro app. Other Android-based smartwatches have far superior apps that you can run the watch with than this one does. You have to use the Fit Pro app. That's the only one that really works with this watch. I've tried other apps and they don't work at all. So you're stuck with the Fit Pro app. And it's an inferior app. That's all I'm going to say about it. This watch does not have an continuously on feature, which is why I'm having to constantly push the button to keep it on for you. Other smartwatches, including the Apple Watch, have a continuous on feature where even if the screen goes off to save battery, any movement of the wrist would cause it to come back on. That's not the case with this watch. You have to push the button to make anything happen on this watch. I just reset the watch, and I shouldn't have done that, but I don't care. There we go. See, now it's showing 0 time again because I just reset it. Anyways, I'm going to have to repair that with my phone now to get the time. There's no way to set this watch without pairing the watch to your phone, which I really do not like. I would much prefer not to have my watch paired to my phone. There you go. It'll count my jumping jacks. See what else it'll do here. It'll keep up with my sleep. See what else it'll do here. It gives me a different, that's my menu there. This will keep up with my volleyball strokes. This will keep up with my sit-ups. That's a little menu here. That'll enable me to count my time I'm running. That'll enable me to take a picture if I were paired with my phone, which I am not right now because I just reset the watch. That'll count my steps. Other little features on here. For example, there's a heart rate monitor. There's other health features on here as well. Stopwatch feature. There's my heart rate feature. See if it'll give me a heart rate eventually. It's very slow to do that. I've had a couple of nurses who have looked at this when I was wearing it, and they said they didn't think that the heart rate reading was accurate. It shows it at 103/74. This watch is what it is. If you want a watch that looks like an Apple Watch and doesn't cost you a lot of money, this is the watch to buy. Here we go. We got a little charging disc here, and as you can see here, it plugs into the USB and then charges there, sits on the charger. It's a nice enough little setup. Let's get down to brass tacks with this. The first day that I attempted to wear it, I was disappointed with the fact that it does not have an always on feature. I was disappointed with the fact that I had to push a button to see what time it was, especially because I was at a ball game and you're sitting in an awkward seat. You've got your hot dog, you got your drink. You're not really able to push the button. Another problem with this watch is that about halfway through the ball game, the watch just reset itself. I didn't reset it. It just took it upon itself to reboot itself. It had a pretty much full charge. There was no reason for it. I hadn't touched it. There was no reason for it to reset itself. It did. And so it was showing midnight, and I had to repair it to my phone there in the ballpark to get it to tell time again. That was very frustrating. Also, in sunlight, you look at that and you say, well, that looks clear enough, and it does. But in sunlight, you can barely see it. That was another thing that was frustrating. And so, our regular viewers know that I've not been a fan of smartwatches. I had high hopes for this one, and I thought that it was going to change my mind and I was going to finally enjoy wearing a smartwatch. That was not the case for me. However, there are other people who would probably absolutely love this watch. Again, it has a gazillion features. They all appear to work. It's an affordable watch. It looks just like the Apple Watch on the wrist. You can even swap out Apple Watch bands and straps and bracelets for this watch, and they fit on there just fine. I also want to give this watch high marks on the battery, because the battery went for life on this watch was 9 days before I had to recharge it. And so that is saying something. A lot of smartwatches, you got to recharge them, every 16, 18 hours. Even good ones, some of them only have a battery life of a day and a half, 2 days. And this one went for 9 days. Anyways, it's called the X7. And you can decide for yourself if it's something that you would want to invest in. For $10, if you want to wait forever for it to come from China, you can't go wrong. If you want to get it, Amazon Prime, 2-day shipping with Amazon's return guarantee, then you're looking at about a $20 investment. Anyways, if somebody wants to email me, the email is on the screen, poorboyshorologypodcast@aol.com. You PayPal me $10, I'll drop this puppy in the mail to you. It can be yours. And if you want to see the unboxing, then go back to last month's Poor Boys Horology podcast and you can see that video. Let's go ahead and break for a commercial. And then we'll have another watch review. We'll be reviewing the Timex Marlin reissue. Phone with our good friend Clint Lacey. So your newest project is you've started a publishing company, Foothills Media, and you'll be publishing 3 tremendous books. The first of those is your book, The Beginner's Guide to False Flags. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about that book?
If you were wondering how we ended up at this point in our history and everything that's going on, Beginner's Guide to False Flag takes you from the beginning of the country until the election of Donald Trump, Charlottesville, the rise of the communists, and the Russian collusion hoax. The rape of Delaware County is a story in which a United States veteran defended himself against a known drug felon only to find out that the local police were in on it. Crooked prosecutors, and one of those prosecutors was actually arrested coming back from an island in the Caribbean in a murder for hire plot. And it just details just how corrupt one small county can be. And in the book, I said that Delaware County, Oklahoma, in the past was a safe haven for outlaws from Missouri and Arkansas. And what the reader will find out, it still is. Blood in the Ozarks, expanded second edition, 156-year-old government cover-up in which out of control Union officer led his men to murder men, women, and children at a Christmas gathering in the Missouri Ozarks. I found it Foothills Media in 2019 because I'm dedicated to bringing you the truth.
Thank you, Clint. I know that our listeners are going to want to check out Foothills Media, so tell them how they can do so.
Well, you can visit us at foothillsmedia.net, and that will take you to our website where you can browse the books, read our blog posts, and catch up on news that you won't find anywhere else in the mainstream media. foothillsmedia.net.
And this brings us to our look-see at the Timex Marlin reissue. And now we have the reissue, which is the black-faced, next to the 1968 that was my grandfather's watch. As you can see, there are some definite differences to these watches. For example, if you look at the lugs here on the original Timex versus the lugs here on the reissue Timex, you'll see that there are different lugs. You'll also see the number indices here at 12, 3, 6, and 9, whereas on this watch they are at 12, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. You'll see that the Timex font here and the Timex branding appears to be about the same, but the original has the word waterproof, whereas the reissue does not. The reissue does come with a lizard skin type strap. It's probably not real lizard skin, but this is the same type of strap that the original was issued with. Of course, this being a strap that I had replaced many years ago. But you'll also see too that you see the crown here on the new Timex. It's different from the crown on the original Marlin. So there are some differences between this watch, both aesthetically and then also on the inside as well. You'll see I've got pictures on the screen here. This first picture will be the movement that should be in this watch here, and that was an English-made movement. That's a throwaway movement. It's not designed to be repaired. But as I said, this watch is 53 years old, and I wind it up, it still keeps time. Now this watch here, now we're putting that picture up. It has a Chinese-made seagull movement in it. It's a high-quality movement. It really is a good movement. And I believe that movement will give this watch many years of reliable service. Now, one advantage to this movement is that when this movement has a problem somewhere in the future, I will be able to replace, or I will be able to repair this movement. Whereas with this watch, you just had to throw it away. This watch, I had it on the wrist for a week. It drew some compliments. It's a good-looking watch. Right now, this watch says that it's 5:14 and a half. I set this watch a week ago at 5:15, so it has lost maybe it's running within 30 seconds a week, and so its timekeeping is excellent. You will also see this watch has a second hand. The original Timex does not. I bought these handy calipers at Harbor Freight today. You see here 33 millimeters, and then we'll put the other Timex here, the original, and 33 millimeters. So both are measuring to the same case diameter. You see here the new Timex has a 9 millimeter case depth. The original has an 8 millimeter case depth. A slight difference. The new Marlin does have a signed clasp. And here is a comparison of the two watch backs. Of course, this one here being the reissue, and this one here being the original. Overall, I'm very happy with the Timex Marlin reissue. And I think that if you're looking for a new watch acquisition that will give you a retro feel, I believe that you will find this to be an excellent choice. That said, it was not your grandfather's Timex. One of our big sponsors here on the Poor Boys Horology podcast is TBR Magazine, the Barnes Review magazine, and one of the contributing editors at the Barnes Review is my good friend Harold Scharnhorst, Harold Hestovich Scharnhorst. Harold is someone who I have enjoyed interviewing several times on both of my radio shows, and you know, if this weren't a horology podcast, I would interview him right here on this show as well. But Harold had a tremendous story to tell. When he was a little boy, his dad basically raised the army that repelled the Nazi invasion of Norway during the Second World War. And so Harold grew up with a dad who was basically the commander of the Norwegian Armed Forces. He was the leader of the Norwegian Underground. And then when the war was over, Harold and his family immigrated here to the United States. And Harold ended up enlisting in the United States Army. He ended up working some very interesting jobs. Currently, he is a professional photographer, writer, and broadcaster living in the state of Idaho. And he took all of his story and he wrote it down in a 470-page book. And this 470-page book has over 300 photographs. And the book is called An Immigrant Remembers. Harold sent me a copy of this book about 2 years ago, and I read it, and the story was fascinating. I could not put it down. An Immigrant Remembers. And you'll want to get your hands on this book. You really will. And you can do so. Of course, you see it on the screen, the cover of An Immigrant Remembers by Harold Hestovich Scharnhorst. And you can go to Harold's blog, www.halsharnblog.blogspot.com. That's www.halsharnblog.blogspot.com. That's up on your screen right now. You can email Harold homefrontbooks@alpinemontana.com, or you could go to Harold's Facebook page. Again, all of these contact informations are on your screen, or just mail $30 to Homefront Publishing, P.O. Box 55, Moyie Springs, Idaho, 83845. Again, it's on your screen. You want to read this tremendous dynamic book, An Immigrant Remembers. It was a story that as I was reading this book, I just couldn't put it down. And you won't be able to put it down either. And so you'll want to read this great story, An Immigrant Remembers by Harold Hestovich Scharnhorst. Go back, hit rewind, hit pause, so that you can get your hands on this contact information and order a copy of this great book, An Immigrant Remembers by Harold Hestovich Scharnhorst. And now we're finally to the review that most of you have probably been tuned into the entire program for, and that is my review of this, the Tudor Black Bay replica. My experience with this watch, I'm not going to go over a lot that was already covered in the unboxing. If you want to hit the rewind and look at some of the things that I pointed out during the unboxing, you're more than welcome to do that. But just to cover new ground, what I've discovered and what I have determined in the 11 days that this watch has been on my wrist. First of all, I said in the unboxing video that I was going to have to remove a link so that the watch would fit my wrist. I did not have to do that. I was able to make a micro adjustment, and by doing that, the watch now fits very nicely upon the wrist. And so I'm very happy with that. I set the watch during the unboxing video, and I had, of course, I made the micro adjustment. I put it on my wrist. I went about my day, and that was June 1st. And then what I did was I, sometime in the evening, ate dinner, sat down, watched TV. It was about 10 o'clock or so, about 10:20, I believe. In the evening, I looked at my watch, and my watch said 10:10. I didn't think anything of it. But just a few seconds later, I just happened to get a glimpse of a wall clock that said 10:20, and I realized that my watch, even though it was running, had lost 10 minutes somewhere along the way. And so what did I do? I pulled out my iPhone, and I set my watch according to the iPhone so that I would have the most accurate time to set it to. And I went back to watching television. I just assumed, well, I didn't wind it enough the first time around. And so I wound it up, and I went back to watching television. In fact, I wound it 40 times when I reset it. And then I went to bed, woke up in the morning, and it was about 8:15. And my watch said 8:15. I asked Alexa what time it was. She told me it was 8:15. Everything looks good. And so I went about my day. At what would have probably been about 2 o'clock, I looked at my watch, and it said 1:30. And I thought, wow, I'm doing really good on time today. So I thought I had some time to take care of some other stuff. What I didn't realize is that my watch had stopped. I looked at my watch again. I don't know, what probably would have been about 2:15. And I realized that my watch still said 1:30. And I'm like, ruh-roh. So I looked at the time on my Mac, and it said that it was 2:15. And so I realized that I had a problem. And so what did I do? I took the watch off my wrist, and I unscrewed the crown, and I set it back to the right time, and I wound it again. You know, by this time I was thinking there's probably a mechanical problem with the watch. And so I put it back on my wrist and went about my business. And sometime while I was sleeping, the watch had stopped again and had lost some time. I remembered something that I had seen maybe over a year ago. And that was that in some Chinese watches that they put a plastic ring around the movement. And so I thought, you know, I wonder if that's the case with this watch. And that ring is somehow, you know, preventing the watch from moving. That you've got the rotor that turns, and sometimes that ring will prevent the rotor from spinning properly, so the watch just isn't rewinding itself. And that's my problem. And so I took the case back off the watch, and sure enough, there was a plastic ring. And I thought, oh, lovely. Well, my first temptation would be to remove the ring, but in doing that, I felt the movement was just a little loose. I could have maybe tried to shave the ring just a little bit, but I didn't want to alter this watch too much, especially because it wasn't mine. I wanted to find the quickest path to fix. So what I did was I put the case back on, but when I started to feel resistance, when I started to feel that I was having to apply pressure to get that case back on, I knew that I was pressing that plastic down into the watch movement. And so then I just eased back a little bit, eased the case back just enough to not have that pressure there. And then I set the watch, then I wound the watch, and I've had the watch on wrist now for 8 days, and the watch is gaining 7 seconds a day. So the watch is running fast, it's running 7 seconds a day fast, but the watch has not stopped in 8 days, the watch has kept time, and the watch is running 7 seconds fast. Of course, a chronometer, plus or minus 6 seconds a day, you can call a watch a chronometer. 7 seconds, not quite chronometer timekeeping, but still very good. Invictas, Seikos, Citizen watches, Miyota movements, and so forth, they generally don't do within 7 seconds a day. So 7 seconds a day is exceptional timekeeping, especially for a watch that somebody paid $68 for. Having taken the back off the watch, I can see it's got some kind of a Chinese seagull movement in it. And that's the movement that the specs of the watch at DHgate said that it was supposed to have. I'm assuming it's probably a pretty good movement. The seagull movements generally are. They're generally a good workhorse, high-quality Chinese movement. If somebody had bought this watch and they did not understand how Chinese watches are manufactured, if they didn't think to check for that plastic ring around the watch movement. And the reason the Chinese put it in there is because they put the same movements in, you know, however many different watches. And so they make the movement small so that it'll fit in the small cases. And then the ring is kind of a spacer to keep it from jiggling around too badly in a larger case. You know, had somebody not known to check for that, they would have just thought that this was a bad watch, a bad movement, and they would have just tossed it. Now, had there not been a plastic ring around the movement, one of two things would have been at play to cause this watch to stop and lose time the way it was. Either one, the movement itself was defective, or two, there was some kind of a piece of debris or dirt or something that was in the movement that, you know, quality control should have prevented that from happening. But again, Chinese watches sometimes lack that quality control. And that piece of dirt or that little speck or that little shaving or whatever it was will jam the gears of the movement, and then you wind the watch and it starts running again until that little piece of debris gets back to a certain spot in the movement of the watch. And then, of course, you know, the watch stops again. But that wasn't the case. The problem here was that plastic ring. So anyways, somebody who didn't know to check for something like that, didn't know how to fix that problem, would have been unhappy with this watch. But the watch has been running for 8 days now. It's been keeping really good time, gaining 7 seconds a day, which again is very good for a mechanical watch. Very happy with that performance. The watch is comfortable on the wrist. The watch looks good on the wrist. The lume on this watch, I probably should have taken the time one night to give y'all a lume shot. I didn't do it. The first night, I remember looking at my watch and thinking, you know, the lume isn't very good on this watch. The second night, I remember thinking, well, okay, I guess the lume's just no good on this watch. I don't know, at some point, probably around 4 or 5 in the morning, I remember waking up and looking at my watch in the middle of the night and saying, whoa, that's a bright lume. And so I guess it just took a couple days for these things to just charge up in sunlight. But when they finally did, this watch has a really bright lume. And, you know, at 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, I can look at my watch and the lume is still bright enough that I can tell the time. So I'm very happy with the lume on this watch. I'm very happy with the appearance of this watch. I'm very happy with the construction of this watch. Now, I will say that the signed crown, in comparison to a original Tudor, is probably not as crisp, and the dial, the printing on the dial probably is not quite as dark or as defined as an original would be. If you were to set this next to an original Tudor, I'm sure you would see a lot of differences, and you would be able to spot the fake from the real. But wearing it independently by itself, it is a nice looking watch. I took my little Harbor Freight calipers and I measured 39 millimeters, and Tudor says the specs for this watch is 39 millimeters. Our thickness here is 14 millimeters, and the specs for this watch, according to Tudor, are 15 millimeters. And of course, like I said, I backed this case back off just a touch, and so there's probably a millimeter there maybe that I'm picking up here. So this watch is probably 2 millimeters thinner than it should be, but you wouldn't notice that on the wrist. But just for those of you who want to know how closely or unclosely the replica maker got to Tudor's specs. The bracelet is nice, and the bracelet is clean. There are no sharp edges on the bracelet. The clasp is nice. To give this watch a score, if you will, you're not going to buy a $3,500 watch for $68. It's just not going to happen. But for $68, this is a well-made watch. It keeps good time. It's a piece of jewelry. It's attractive. It has a nice bracelet. It has a nice clasp. The bezel has a nice bezel. Bezel action works really well. There are just a lot of things about this watch that make it fun to wear. We do not want to put ourselves into the business of promoting fake watches or of encouraging you to purchase them. But I know some viewers are just, you know, you're hell-bent for leather that you're going to buy one. And so I guess if you want to go to DHgate and look this up, like I said, Davis B paid $68 for it. I've seen them on AliExpress for as much as $350. probably the same one that Davis B paid $68 for on DHgate. And I've seen reviews of fake Tudors. If you want to look those up on YouTube, you can look those up. And people are saying that they're getting them at wish.com, which is where Davis B attempted to purchase his first replica. And I believe he said that that was a $113 purchase, and they sent that Fako IIG quartz watch. And so that's why he went over to DHgate to get the replicas that he ultimately had mailed to me for review. But I've seen people doing reviews of Tudor Black Bays that they purchased on Wish for $113, $123, $133, $153. Again, they're probably getting the same $68 watch that Davis B purchased there at DHgate. For $68, Davis B, I think you are going to be happy with this watch. Is it the perfect replica? No, it's not. Are there better replicas out there? Maybe there are. I don't know. But I will say that if I paid $68 for this watch, I'd be happy with it. This watch is nicer than some Seikos and some Invictas out there that you paid a lot more than $68 for. So anyways, that is my review. I do want to say one more thing because I forgot to mention it earlier, and that was in my review of the X7 watch. And that is, as you can see there, that it is on military time. And there's no way to move this watch to regular 12-hour timekeeping. It just won't let you do it. You have to set the watch in the app, and you have to sync it with your phone to do that. And there's just no way. There's no menu on the watch that allows you to change the time, and there's no setting in the Fit Pro app, which, by the way, is just a piece of crap app. Half of it's in Chinese. There's just no way in the Fit Pro app that you can change this from military time to regular time. Anyways, those are our watch reviews today. This watch, Timex Marlin reissue, and Tudor Black Bay replica. Thumbs up is a watch, is a replica. I don't really want to give it a rating because, again, we don't want to get into the business of endorsing replica watches. But it keeps good time. It's well built. And what can I say? Anyways, that's our show today. If you're one of our advertisers, our email address is on the screen, Poor Boys Horology Podcast. Shoot me an email. Say, hey, Dr. Ed, I'd like to advertise on an upcoming show. Truth is, I feel like we have a lot of advertisement on the show, so what'll probably happen is depending on what you want to advertise, I'll either make you a really sweet deal to start advertising in 2022, or else I'll make some kind of a deal with one of our current advertisers to let us fulfill the remaining months of their advertising contract in 2022, and maybe give them a couple of extra months just to compensate them for that, and then we'll put you into their spot. Anyways, not trying to clutter up the show with too much advertising, but I want to make it available. If you have any questions for me, again, Poor Boys Horology Podcast at AOL.com. If you want to get your hands on this, PayPal me $10, and it can be yours. Send me an email first, make sure that it's still available. If you have a watch that you'd like me to review, email me, Poor Boys Horology Podcast at AOL.com, and maybe we can figure out how we can do a review on an upcoming program. Next month, we'll have another great show for you. Not for sure what we're going to talk about, but I'm sure it will be interesting. So come back again next month for the next broadcast. Click like and subscribe. That way you'll get a notification from YouTube or Rumble. However you're watching this, you'll get a subscriber notice saying, hey, we've just put up another podcast, so you'll know when the next podcast, the July podcast, is up and available.
Poor Boys Horology Podcast is an ED Media production.